Well, it's here. Formula E's 2024 Season 10 kicks off in Mexico. So here we go. So it's all go for, let's be honest, a very subdued opening race of the season, with one car not even making it to the starting grid, that being the ERT car of Sergio Sette Camara. This was due to an inverter failure on the car, again reinforcing my opinions on them not having OEM support, now really damaging them in the Gen 3 era of Formula E. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. Jake Dennis, the reigning champion, only managed to start from 14th alongside his teammate, which we know was due to a setup issue on both cars, with the software not being incorrectly synced with what the drivers were hoping for. Whilst the former champion, Nick De Vries, on the other hand, was at the back of the pack, in a car I think he's going to struggle to perform with this year, given the strength of the rest of the field. Although let's not forget, he's only really had a couple of chances to drive this new car. I mean, with the failed testing in Valencia and the damage to the vehicle there, he was given a compensation test, that was in the wet, and realistically he's not really been able to perform as he can. In terms of racing, let's be honest, the only real changes were at the front, with Buemi and Wehrlein fighting it out for first and second, and Cassidy making up spaces on Gunther. Gunther, however, did an amazing job in that Maserati, did a fantastic qualifying section and was able to keep up with the rest of the pack. He really has shown that he's got the performance, but also I think it's quite interesting, as when you look at the rest of the field, you actually saw that during the race there was actually only a % difference between all of the cars. Now, we're used to the first series of the Gen 3 era having the Jaguars and the Porsche powertrains running our way with 2, 3 and sometimes even 4% more power on occasion. So it does go to show that the guys back at the factory really have put the work in to make these cars more competitive. As for the Jaguars, both of them had to take a grid place penalty due to missing a red flag during the practice session. So perhaps maybe the race could have been slightly differently had the Jaguars locked out the second row. Cassidy, on the other hand, took third place and actually took the fastest lap of the eprix, throwing the gauntlet down to his friend and teammate Mitch Evans, who started out well and ended up going backwards, not finding the pace in the car. However, we have now found out this is due to a brake balancing issue on the car, so hopefully the engineers and the technicians can work this out for him and he'll have a competitive car in Diriyah. Okay, it's not his most favourite track, but by the end he was barely managing to fend off Jean-Eric Vergne, and I think realistically the pace of the Jaguar and the DSs were very closely matched. I think it was just Evans' driving style and the mechanical ability that car had to go around corners that really managed to keep the DS Penske off of his gearbox. The new commentary from the TNT broadcast, of those of you watching the UK or streaming, was a little bit odd, with a former footballer in the paddock and a former F1 driver in the commentary box. To be fair, David Coulthard I felt made a good effort at times, even commentating on his lack of knowledge of the sport and not being able to sympathise fully with the drivers, as he's never actually driven one of these cars, something hopefully they'll address later on in the season. For a newbie watching the sport, I can imagine it would be nice to have someone asking questions on their behalf to the season commentators. Overall, we did a good job, and I think as the season goes on, his commentary will get better and better, and maybe bring some of his F1-isms into the sport as he watches it. As always with Mexico, you're pretty much guaranteed a safety car, and Robin Frijns gave us just that. He managed to four-wheel slide into the crash barrier, and ultimately he needed to do that because he was driving his car very, very hard. He got himself out of position and ultimately slid across into the barrier. But this was all due to a very poor start from him. For some reason, he ended up going backwards at the start. We don't currently know why yet, but hopefully it was just poor reaction timing perhaps. Now, during the race, the top 5 cars had used all their attack modes, and they were running them down during the safety car session. With Evans still having to take one last attack mode, this could have been his afternoon, but ultimately that wouldn't be the case. With Wehrlein leading away, the other Porsche Felix da Costa decided to go racing and try and force his way through a gap that just ultimately wasn't there, spinning out and damaging his suspension. This came as during free practice he managed to break his suspension there too, so not a good weekend for the Porsche mechanics. Because of his antics, he'll receive a 3-place penalty in the Diriyah eprix. Jake Dennis, on the other hand, managed to get to P9 with a good race for him, although he had hoped for P5, but software issues and a brake balancing issue that's now come to light really did damage his weekend, both in qualifying and the race. Oliver Rowland in the Nissan had a good race, climbing from 20th to 11th and just missing out on some crucial points for the Nissan driver. The DS cars looked powerful, however lacking in terms of chances of progressing up the pecking order. Perhaps on a different track with more overtaking chances, it might have been a different story for them. The pack really didn't change much over the course of the race, and it was a little numb towards the end. The only real action being the last 8 laps, with Evan bunching the pack up and watching the peloton waiting to see if anyone could break up the pack and take a wild lunge, which unfortunately they couldn't and didn't happen. The mechanical grip of that Jaguar again just holding on. Wehrlein did a sterling job and took the lead from pole and controlled the pace of the race from that point onwards, taking an easy victory and another trophy for the cabinet. With Porsche's hard work paying off and taking a strategic early attack mode similar to Jaguar's mindset of last season clearly paid off for him. Buemi has really managed to find his groove again with this envisioned team, and even managing to match his total points from the entire last year in one single race. He looks at home with his old team, and I think he's going to be a force to reckon with this year. Jaguar managed to come out well from a team's point of view, with the only set of cars within the top 5, giving them some valuable points to start the season off with. The only real controversy is the FIA's investigation into the Porsche-powered cars, and a software tweak over the traction control system for a better start at the beginning of the race. Something I don't really feel did anything for any of the Porsche-powered cars. Ultimately, the FIA decided it was within the rules and no positions got overruled. However, you can bet all the other teams are now working on upgrades to give themselves smoother starts as well. But ultimately, we didn't see the Andretti's move far forward, and to be honest with you, neither the Porsches. And again, we've heard about the delay in the charge attack, which is now likely to take place in the second half of the season, unfortunately. However, we should get to see it this year, and I really want to see it this year and see how it pays off. I won't say it was a great start to the season, but it was a start nevertheless. Nothing memorable, and perhaps maybe just a little bit numb. So, roll on Diriyah.